Hey guys, what's up? Producer engineer Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you so much for checking out another one of our review videos. Continuing with reviewing some plugins today, and we are taking a look at one of the kind of loudest and most disruptive companies in the plugin space, Slate Digital, run by the famous Stephen Slate himself. I love these guys. They're doing some really incredibly cool and innovative stuff, not only in the plugin world, but also in the hardware world with virtual mic modeling systems and the Slate Raven series of kind of touchscreen tablet-style consoles. Just some really, really cool stuff, and they're definitely shaking up the industry in a lot of ways. But the thing that, to me, they're most known for are their plugins. And they offer the Everything bundle, which includes every plugin they have in their inventory. I think it's just 20, 25 bucks a month. And what you get for that is just insane. It's very catch-all, which I love. They've got a ton of like vintage emulated pieces of kit, which is kind of what we're going to be taking a look at today in terms of compressors. They have some more modern stuff that's really, really great for like, cleaner, more technical EQs. They have amazing mastering tools. They have great reverbs. They have great effects. In terms of delays and modulations, they just have a ton of stuff that comes with this bundle. In particular, though, what I want to look at in this video is the virtual mix rack and some of the compressors that you get as a part of the virtual mix rack. So the VMR it's a very, very cool concept that I really like, because it basically gives you the ability to create custom channel strips between different channels. So you can pull up virtual mix rack pretty much across the board, and on each one it's going to let you build your own little channel strip. And they have all kinds of different like preamp emulations. This is where you can get into some of your mic emulations. This is where you load it if you do use the Slate virtual mic system. But again, today we're just going to be looking at the dynamics modules, the compressors and limiters. So right off the bat, just getting into it, we have three recreations of arguably the most famous compressor of all time, the UA 1176. Okay, and we have the FG116, which is basically the revision T, so the blackface 1176, kind of middle of the road in terms of clean response versus like a more dirty vintage vibe. It's right in the middle. And I actually have the warm audio hardware recreations of the 1176 revision D. We do have a review of those up on the channel, and I can attest from personal experience, this sounds really, really close. That's, again, Slate is legendary for a lot of stuff, but their analog modeling is top notch. Second, we have the FG116 Modern, which is more of an let's see here, hot rodded revision A FET compressor. So the revision A that's interesting that they would say that. The revision A is actually the oldest version of the 1176, but this is probably designed to emulate something with more modern transformers and more modern components put in the signal path, so you get that classic compression response, but more of a modern tone out of it. And then, of course, the vintage FG116, which is an exact emulation of the revision A. Now, the revision A of the 1176 is the dirtiest, the most aggressive, the most mid-forward, and has the most harmonic distortion of any of the 1176 style circuits. Moving on down the list here, we have our FG401, which is very close in nature to the SSL 4000 series bus compressor, 4000G bus compressor. So it's VCA, very transparent, very smacky, used on a lot of mix buses. If you have heard a record in the last 40 years, there's a good chance that some part or even all of that record is running through an SSL console compressor, a lot like this one. So again, giving you access to these really famous, well-known circuits. I have an Audioscape clone of this compressor in hardware form in my rack. We've done a video review of that on the channel as well. And again, I can attest, having used a physical clone and then this, they are nigh all indistinguishable from each other. Moving on, we have the FG Bomber. Now, this is an original design from Slate. Bomber uses a sophisticated analog model circuit paths to increase the impact of tracks and mixes. So this is something that you could do on mix bus. This is something that you could use on a drum bus. It's a glue kind of a thing. It's a glue and smack and punch. And when we get into taking an actual look and listen at this one, you'll see it's a little bit simpler to use. Next, we have the FG Stress, which is, I think, one of the latest plugins that they've designed. And it is a perfect recreation of the Empirical Labs EL8 Distressor. Again, another insanely legendary compressor. And this is designed with versatility in mind. If you know anybody who owns a hardware distressor, they'll tell you that you can set it up to sound like almost any compressor on Earth. And the plugin is no disappointment in terms of recreating that. Now, we do have a few gates in here, which can be very, very useful, but, gates aren't exactly as tonally awesome as compressors are, so we will probably jump over those in this video. Then we have the Monster. Now, the Monster is all about aggression. What they've done here is they've taken the all buttons in setting on an 1176, which, if you guys aren't familiar, on the original hardware unit and the new hardware recreations, the ratio is selected with buttons, and you can actually press all 4 of the ratio buttons in at the same time, and you kind of break the compressor. It's not actually damaging it. It just screws with the signal and makes the compression super, super aggressive and crazy sounding. And so Slate, with the Monster here, they took that and said, okay, everybody loves this all buttons in mode. What if we just make a compressor that just does that all the time, and you can really sculpt it? Because, once you put an 1176 in that mode, you still have attack and release, but it's just obliterated from there. So the Monster gives you that sound, but lets you tailor it a little bit more. Incredibly, incredibly cool idea. And then finally, we have the U73B, which it's a quote-unquote faithful emulation of a vintage German broadcast compressor. I am not 100% sure which compressor or what compressor this one is going after, but vintage German broadcast compressor means tubes first and foremost. So this is going to live very much in the wheelhouse of your Fairchilds, your Altec 436s, your kind of the Telefunken circuit sound, the V72, V76 preamp sound of those pentode tubes. It's going to very much live in that world. Again, I'm not 100% sure what exact actual compressor that's going after in terms of emulation, but that's the kind of wheelhouse it's going to live in, that vintage Verimue kind of a sound. So I've got our virtual mix rack pulled up here on some drums, and let's just take a listen to a few of these select dynamics units and see how they do. So here's our drums dry. Let's go ahead and pull in our 1176 Revision A. Let's see here. So as soon as I bring up that input and I start driving the compression circuit, you can hear it's got just that classic 1176 sound, especially with that Revision A. It's a little bit gritty, it's a little bit mid-forward, super punchy, has this kind of explosive vibe to it. But of course, in true modern fashion, Slate has been courteous enough to include a parallel for us as well, so we can just totally obliterate these. And let's see here, how can we do all buttons in mode here? I'm curious. We can just do 20 to 1, that's fine. I'm sure you can do all buttons in somehow. I'm not exactly sure how in this particular one. But anyways, you can do really, really aggressive compression and then dial it back. So just to give you an idea of that, we can just get silly with it and then pull back on that mix knob, and you get all the excitement of that aggressive compression, but it's blended with the original dry signal to keep it nice and even and sort of more natural sounding, okay? So there's the Revision A, love it, super, super faithful to the original. And, again, in this mix rack, you can drag, if you want to, for whatever reason, do 2 compressors or something in line, you can move them around, you can chain them into one another, and then if you don't like one, you just drag it back to your little bin, and you're good to go. So I love the workflow and the layout. Reminds me a lot of like a 500 series rack in the analog world, where you've got little modules and you can just stick them in wherever you want. Very, very similar kind of approach, but within a plugin. So very cool there. 1176s sound great, sound faithful. Let's take a listen to our SSL here. Go to a 4 to 1. Now, this is a recreation of the SSL circuit, but we do have some more options here. We have additional ratio options. On the original SSL, we have let me just look at mine for reference. We have 2, 4, and 10. And then on some other more modern recreations and other variations that SSL has released, they have added 1.5. I have seen 8 on some of them, 6 on some of them. But this, we've got 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 6, or 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10. So even more ratio options than you get on the original hardware. But again, this guy is all about punch. I mean, nothing gives drums punch and glue like an SSL compressor, especially with the hardware. I do find the Slate recreation to be just a touch dirtier than the hardware unit, at least the hardware version that I have, which again is from Audioscape, so it's a clone of the, what I understand of it, it's the clone of the original SSL 4000G series bus compressor. This one feels dirtier to me. It feels like there's some extra character in there, but definitely nothing that's a bad thing necessarily, depending on the sound that you're going for. We do have transformable switching in and out of this, so if you want it to be cleaner, you can, and then you can kick in that transformer when you would like to add a little bit of extra saturation. So fantastic sounding. Keep on moving. Let's take a listen to our bomber here. Now, like I said a moment ago, this one is a little bit simpler. It's more of a kind of a one knob compressor type design. We have drive, which is going to be your kind of saturation level. We have intensity, which I believe just is kind of the overall compression controller, the intensity of the compression. So that's kind of affecting ratio and attack and release and all this stuff all at once. And then we have tone, which this is going to affect the overall tone of the circuit. So let's start at middle of the road, or excuse me, 0% intensity. We'll start neutral drive. And we'll bring the intensity up to about 50%. So out and in. So you can hear it really trying to emphasize those transients because we're in present mode at the moment. Let's switch it up to fat. A bit thicker in the low mids. And then tight. And tight's probably going to be a slower release time to really keep it, everything under control in terms of gain. But, we can go to fat here. And really get some nice, mellow, saturated compression out of it by pushing that drive all the way up. A lot of saturation. So that's the bomber. Moving on, FG Stress. I probably am not going to spend too much time on this one because there's so many cool different little options. We've got some different high-pass side chaining options in here. We've got mid-response curve. We've got a few different distortion things. And then we have a variety of ratio options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 10, 20 to 1, and then nuke, which again is kind of going to be this all buttons in kind of vibe. And then we've got input. We can add harmonic distortion, both down here, and then also you'll see this light up when it gets beyond 1%, so you know that you're really into distortion territory as opposed to just saturation, attack, release, and output. But that's the beauty of Stressors, again, as anyone will tell you about them, is that they are just so incredibly versatile. Really, really snappy, just kind of neutral. They sound a lot like an 1176, but you dial the release and the attack in correctly, and you start messing with the distortion and the saturation options in here, you can really get into the territory of a lot of other compressors, tonally speaking. Then we've got the Monster, which again, this guy is all about emulating that all buttons in mode, but giving you all the control over it. Okay, so I love it, and that's barely even driving the input, so if you want to get really crazy. You know, if you're the type that loves crushing drum loops, the Monster's really going to be your best friend. You can get all the pump you want. Oof. Bringing that punch really accentuates, like right in that 2 to 4K range. And then again, we have a parallel compression option here, so we can dial in something just silly like that. But I do kind of like what it's doing. Just dial it back, and it feels more natural, but it keeps that real crisp attack on the ride. Super nice. So you have a lot of fun in that one. And then lastly, our U73B. So this is going to have that real slow, gentle, vibey effect that so many of the great Verimu compressors are known for. We've got either comp or limit mode. We have release times in seconds. So the fastest release is 1/3 of a second. Now, if you guys know pretty much any other compression circuit, you can get release times down into the milliseconds. On this, it's 0.3 seconds and then all the way out to 10 seconds. If you just want to absolutely pin a signal in place, this is going to be your go-to guy for that. We do have a high pass sidechain option here. Calibration, this is going to affect probably our threshold, I would guess, something like that. Not totally sure. And then input and output. So pretty simple circuit, pretty simple to use. Very Beatlesy. It reminds me a lot of some of the EMI, like Chandler TG stuff that you hear. That's all based around the old EMI circuits. This even could be an old EMI compressor that they're emulating here. I'm not totally sure. I'll have to look up what exactly this is going for. But the idea is just that really classic, slow compression vibe that you get from those old tube circuits. So overall, just so much to play with in here. I love it. We've got a couple of these units that are going for like the real classic, again, 1176 SSL. We've got the Bomber and the Monster, which are their own design, which have a lot of really practical use cases. FG Stress is a more modern compressor, but super versatile. And what I really like in this is that they haven't given me 60 models to choose from, and I have to know the nuances of each and every one. They've given me a few of the most famous options, a few of their own options, and then a few things that are a little bit more subtle or more kind of use case dependent. There's a lot of companies out there where you get their plug-in bundles. I'm not going to name names, but and you download it and you open it up and there's 20 different compressors or something, and they're all slightly different. In this, we just really have our basics, especially if you're like me and you like more of that, more of the vintage vibe or the emulation of these great hardware units that we all know and love. It's just awesome. You don't get overwhelmed with all kinds of crazy stuff. You see what you have. There's a good amount of options there, but they're all really clear in what they're supposed to do. You just drag it in and start working. So we are going to cover EQs and some of the mastering stuff in a few other videos in terms of using this mix rack. But for today, I just wanted to focus on the compressors. So I hope you found it helpful or informative if you're looking at the everything bundle or wanting to learn a little bit more about what's in it. Hope I could provide some insight. What do you guys think, though? What do you guys think of the Slate stuff overall? Do you use any of these plugins? Are you a fan of them? Are you not a fan of them? Whatever you guys may think or feel, please let us know in the comments down below. We always appreciate hearing from you guys. Again, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. Really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much, and we will see you in the next video.